shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
So the road map for the message today looks something like this. Were, are, and who, how. And our guide today for were, are, who, how is going to be St. Paul. St. Paul wasn't always St. Paul. And in fact, when we first meet Paul in the scriptures, his name is Saul. Saul is a very learned, brilliant, educated Jewish man. And he's a very learned, educated Jewish man who has made it his business to go hunt down followers of the way, to either kill them or to imprison them. But God has got another plan for Saul. There's this huge conversion experience. 3 days later, as if though Saul dies and is reborn again, 3 days later, there is a conversion. Paul becomes a Christian, and all those gifts Paul had been taught as a Jewish man now are brought to serve the Christian church. He becomes our primary theologian. The ways that we think about, talk about, and begin to wrap our brains about what it means to follow Jesus Christ. So, in the New Testament, we have our Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the Gospels are primarily stories about Jesus. John's a little different. He brings some theology along. But it's St. Paul who does most of the theology, most of the ways to think about who is God and what does it mean to be followers of God. And so today, we get some of that in his letter to the Ephesians. The first thing we encounter today is Paul saying, "You were dead." There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no gray area. Paul says, you were dead. There's a classic movie that came out many years ago. It's called Princess Bride. And it's a very dear movie, and it's about a grandfather and his grandson, and it's about a son trying to seek revenge for his father, and there's a love story in there, and all kinds of bizarre characters. Early on in the movie, one of the main characters is killed. So Andre the Giant puts him under his arm, and they go off to Miracle Max to see if Miracle Max can do anything with him. Max, that's right. They arrive at Miracle Max's door, and they finally get Miracle Max to do an examination. And Miracle Max finally determines that he's not really dead. He's just mostly dead. When we hear Paul tell us that we were dead, I think our brains go to that place, well, maybe we were just mostly dead. Maybe there was still something in there kicking around, and that's not what Paul says. Paul says, you were dead, period. Left to our own devices, we chase after darkness and we chase after evil. Left to our own devices, it's all mine, 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 mine. It is a hopeless and dark place when we're left to our own devices. But we are not left to our own devices. We were dead and hopeless, and we were people that surrounded ourselves with darkness so we could hide our evil deeds, but that's not who we are. We have become people of hope and people of light and people with a future. Life has been breathed into us. This week I had a phone call to go visit someone in the hospital. And this person that I went to visit in the hospital has had this extended period of fighting cancer. And all kinds of chemo has been used to battle cancer in his body, right up to the very edge. He's very frail. But this last week, the weather was so lovely and beautiful that he finally thought he had enough energy to go outside and do some work. He went out, he tripped, and broke his neck. He is now, the last I saw him was in the hospital, waiting to find out if they were going to have to do surgery and add a halo. So this man, who's been fighting cancer for years, who is so frail that a trip broke his neck, is laying in the hospital. We're having this conversation, and he's wanting to talk about what's happening in our community and in our world. And quite frankly, that's a pretty dark conversation if we're being really honest about what's going on in our world. But there, in that hospital room, not knowing what's going to happen next, he is not caught in the hopelessness of our world. There in that hospital room, he gave me his testimony. He is a man of profound hope, no matter what's going on inside of his body or his neck. He was dead. He no longer is dead. And the difference is this God who so loved the world that God sent his Son into this world, not to condemn the world that he loves, but to save it. And how does that happen? Well, that's where St. Paul comes back into the picture. And St. Paul is so profoundly clear about this. We are saved by grace. Grace, a free gift, something we can't earn, we don't merit, we don't deserve it. We are saved by grace through faith. We say, we who are only mostly dead, we say, see, we do need to do something. We need to have faith. Dead people don't do anything. The grace is a gift to us. Faith is a gift to us. God so loved the world that he sent his Son. He sent his Son that we might be saved by grace, a free gift through faith. But God has a plan that goes beyond salvation, that goes beyond grace and faith. Paul ends that portion of the reading by saying, God has saved you because God has got a purpose for you. God has got a purpose for each and every one of us. Good works that he created, just as he created gifts and talents and energy and focus and passion in each one of us. God also created ways for each one of us to live that out. Salvation, grace, faith, believing are all God's gifts to us so that we may take those and we may honor them and serve the world, the people around us. People, you were dead. but God has made us alive. By grace, each one of us has been saved for good works. Those very same good works that God prepared to be our way of life. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Well,